Our scripture reading today is taken from John's Gospel, chapter 20, verses 19 and 22. When it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw him. Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As God has sent me, so I send you." When he had said this, he breathed on them and said to them, "Receive the Holy Spirit."
From time to time, Beth invites people who are doing significant work in our community, things that are particular expressions of Christ's love and the grace of God, even if they are working in what might be considered secular situations and professions. So today we're welcoming Rod Harwood to come and speak with us about some of the work he does. So Rod, if you'd come up and have a seat. Thank you. I will give you this. There you go. I'm going to do a little introduction of Rod, and I'm presuming it's accurate because he sent it to us. Yeah. So Rod is an older adult behavioral health coordinator with the GOBHI, Greater Oregon
Greater
Behavioral
Oregon Behavioral Health Incorporated.
Incorporated, serving Eastern Oregon. He's one of 25 specialists who are supporting a statewide initiative providing behavioral health for older adults and people with disabilities in local and regional community mental health programs around the state. And when we talk about around the state, he was telling me the area that he serves, it's almost everything east of the Cascades, almost, isn't it?
Well, Eastern Oregon.
Eastern Oregon,
Yeah.
which is everything east of the Cascades. No. But anyway, just sort of, he also has 38 years of healthcare experience, which includes providing clinical support as a chaplain in hospital, mental health, and hospice settings. So you might have heard that chaplain. He actually has a ministry background as well. In his present role, he promotes enhanced collaboration and coordination among the agencies serving older adults, providing complex case consultation, and ensuring that the people who care for elders are well trained. And he's a trained, positive approach to care, particularly dementia care, enhanced trainer, and an advanced consultant. And in addition, he has certifications as a trainer for WISE, QPR, Living Well with Chronic Conditions, and PEARLS, which I hope he will tell us what those acronyms mean and what they're all about. And he also provides training on a host of topics relating to older adult issues such as advanced directives, grief support, and CIT first responders, and age, death, memory cafes. Well, I'm interested in just exactly what you do at an age, death, memory cafe. So, at any rate, so the first question with all that is going to ask you to sort of unpack some of that and tell us about your work and why it's important to you.
Well, with that, I'm going to start off with a scripture, one that maybe a lot of people are not aware of, and it comes from Leviticus 19:32. Stand up in the presence of the aged. Show respect for the elderly and revere your God. I am the Lord. So, that to me sums up in many ways what my job is about. Standing up for that population. This initiative is about, again, creating and collaborating with community partners in serving older adults, not only in identified mental health needs, but helping to keep ourselves healthy so that we may not maybe experience more severe illness. When I was hired in this position almost 8 years ago, the CEO of GOBHI at the time said to me, "We think we have a job for you," because my job at the hospital, due to corporate restructuring, workforce reduction, poof, disappeared. Part of the lessons in life that you have to learn that you don't learn in school, first off, all things come to an end. Mm-hmm. Life's not fair. It's not about you, but you're a part of something bigger than yourself. You gotta keep on relearning those lessons over and over again.
Can anybody relate?
Yeah. In fact, the week that I was told that my position came to an end, just a couple days beforehand, the superintendent of Helix Schools got a hold of me and asked if I could be the baccalaureate speaker. And I sat down and I actually wrote out those 4 lessons. And these are things that high schoolers need to know. Mm-hmm. I had them written and laid out on my desk, went into a meeting, heard the news that my job was coming to an end, came back and looked at my desk, and I thought, okay, Lord, yeah. You know.
Sometimes it hurts to ask because you might receive.
So when the head of GOBHI came to me and said, we think we have a job for you, and they said it's our GOBHI position. First off, I hate acronyms. And then they were offering me a job that's an acronym. And I said, what, do I get a lightsaber with that? And then I also told, as they were describing the job to me, they said, we see you doing this already. You've been doing this in many ways in the community. And I said, Kevin, who was the CEO at the time, I said, Kevin, you know I'm a minister. I'm a minister at heart, always will be. I did have a counseling degree. I got that from Walla Walla University. And he laughed at me. He says, I've hired a psychiatrist, I've hired a lawyer, I can hire a preacher too. So essentially, you know, that's what this job is about. There are 25 of us across the state. Up until this last summer, I had 8 counties in eastern Oregon that I covered, all the way down to Lakeview on the California border. And that was the other thing. When they assigned those counties to me, I said, if you're going to assign those counties to me, I'm going to be in those counties every single month. Because those counties deserve to have the services just as much as, say, Portland. Mm-hmm. I grew up in western South Dakota. I know what it's like to live rural frontier and not see those that are providing the services show up very often. They show up, and then that's the last we see of them for a long time. Mm. So before the pandemic, I was driving about 5,000 miles every month and a half. Of course, with the pandemic, that changed. We did learn to do things more virtually. Since that time, they have hired another person that covers those southern counties, if you will. So now I just have 5 counties I cover. Morrow, Umatilla, Union, Wallowa, and Baker. Piece of cake. I live in Pendleton. Drove over here this morning, no big deal. In fact, I'll be over here in this area 4 times this month, so because that's what's asked of me. So our job is threefold: build collaboration, provide consultation, and provide trainings to the workforce and to community members. And we can get into more of that later. But why do we do this? Because right now there's 11,000 individuals turning 65 every day in this country. 11,000. It was 10,000. Now there's more people living that are in this country over 65 than under 18 in this country. Now, do you think the state or the federal government's going to be providing more funding to serve that population? No. So part of our job is how to work with community partners to serve the needs even better. So looking at that, first off in the state, 19.3% of the population right now is 65 and above. In Wallowa County, it's about 29%. Okay. 53% of all the churches in Oregon are over 65. And as I look out here, I'm just guessing that's a lot higher here. So those needs are prevalent and continues to grow. Wallowa County is ranked 6th in the state as far as the highest percentage of population that are 65 and older. Wheeler County's first. Gillum County, I'm just looking at counties in East Oregon. Gillum County's 3rd, Grant County's 4th, and Baker County's 7th. So, next one.
Sure. Well, so can you share with us then some of the unique, talking about this older population, a third of our county, of which we are members of that, what are the unique challenges that older adults and individuals with disabilities face, particularly in rural settings?
Services. I was over at Wallowa Valley Senior Living. I'm going to be providing training there in a couple of weeks. And Jennifer was telling me, she says, we have a lot of older adults even moving to Wallowa County that are retiring and moving here because even though it seems like the real estate is still expensive, it's cheaper than other places. Plus, it's a beautiful place to live. But they're also, they're turning 65. They're bringing their parents with them. And coming to like the senior living saying, hey, how much space you got available? They're already capacity, already struggling when it comes to workforce. That was happening before the pandemic. Already the staff, and I'll get into that more later, as far as education in terms of working with older adults and all the different needs relating to that, struggling in terms of knowledge and skill. Transportation is an issue, obviously. Social isolation and loneliness. Financial constraints. We have and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but when it comes to, I think about 40% of older adults rely solely upon Social Security for their income. Lack of physical and behavioral health providers. We have some great providers in terms of Winding Waters here and Wallowa Valley Center for Wellness, but yet at the same time there's a lot of need. Do we have home health hospice in Wallowa County?
I don't believe so.
No, we don't. Huge need. But even larger counties are struggling in that area. When I worked for St. Anthony Hospital, they closed their home health hospice.
Ooh.
Okay. Another thing, though, is distrust of the system and government in general, and will not necessarily reach out for services because of that distrust. And low-income older adults on average is about $14,794 a year. They tend to be more than likely living alone, individually. So that's just naming some of the issues. And I could spend time getting input from you all about what those issues are too. So,
Sure.
anyway.
Well, and some of the things that you do is training. And so as a behavioral coordinator, what strategies or programs have you found to be particularly effective in addressing the mental health needs of older adults and individuals with disabilities in our rural communities?
I pull from my chaplaincy experience.
Okay.
And when I was a chaplain in the hospital, I always made rounds, checking in, if you will, my parish members, both those patients in the room and the staff. So a lot of what I end up doing is, again, I go where people are. I don't wait for the phone call. It galls me, and I'm talking about a church that I had attended for a while, where they put out on the Facebook, if you need a pastor, call. Well, no, the pastor's supposed to call and check in and see how you're doing. Yeah, that's the shepherd part of me, anyway. I go around, I go where people are, and I'm there consistently. So like, for instance, when I go down to Lakeview, I was going down there every month. When they started seeing that I was down there every month, boy, they started showing up all the time. In fact, the person that was in charge of the AAA, which is like what Community Connections is here, she was over in Klamath Falls, 90-some miles away. She rarely ever got over to Lakeview. But since I traveled 340 miles every month to be in Lakeview, she said, Rod, if you travel 340 miles, I can travel 90-some miles to show up every month. So building trust and rapport that way, asking what is our interest and need. And I mentioned earlier about the fact that I'm a certified trainer through positive approach to care relating to dementia. You know why I got that certification? Was showing up over here at senior living. And Jennifer saying, I know my staff need training, but I can't send them to Portland for that.
Yeah.
So I went and got training and came back. The first time I ever presented right after I got training was here. They actually rented or reserved the what's the Foreign Wars, the building, Veterans Foreign Wars, VFW.
Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Over 100 people showed up. Freaked me out a little bit. But over 100 people showed up. I also heard, actually from Jennifer, how we needed to provide more training relating to suicide prevention.
Yes.
I went and got training in QPR, suicide prevention. So,
Well, tell us a little bit about that, the positive approach to care, the whys, the QPR, et cetera, et cetera.
okay. He's moving me on a little bit. So, if you ever look it up, if you ever look up the person Teepa Snow, Teepa Snow is her name. She developed this whole thing. She is a hoot. She is amazing. She has a whole background as an occupational therapist, but she developed this whole area. And I got training from her. And basically, first off, we teach how to understand what's going on up here, what the person is dealing with. When we think of dementia, we think of Alzheimer's, right? That's one of over 100 different conditions. Over 100. There's this big umbrella that we refer to as dementia, and that's just one of them. And so teaching what those that are living with dementia are experiencing, not only we think of dementia, we think of memory loss.
Right.
But just think about for a second all the things that your brain does.
Or doesn't do.
Or doesn't do. It tells you when you're hungry. It tells you when you're cold or hot. It helps you understand language. It lets you know what you're walking on and all that sort of. With dementia, the brain is dying. So it's not just affecting memory, at least 2 parts of the brain are dying. So understanding that, understanding how it's affecting visual range, how it's affecting words that they're picking up and everything, I teach all that. Plus, I then teach how to approach a person depending upon where they are. I provide consultations with families on this. I am going to be providing training for the workforce starting next week, not this coming week, but the next week, every month over at Senior Living. But I also do a 6-part community education too, because 70% of those living with dementia are out in the community. 70% of them have not been diagnosed yet. Who's taking care of them? Who's providing support? You are. So I provide that training, and what ends up happening then is support groups end up popping up as a result because they realize they're not alone in that. I'm actually going to help get the first in-person support group going in Pendleton on Monday. I did a 6-part series there. Okay. I lead a virtual caregiver support group once a month. So I have people all throughout the region that join in. Amongst other things, actually starting, not this coming week, but the following week too, I'll be offering a grief support series virtually. People join in virtually for 6 weeks. That's kind of a holdover from my chaplain days. I do Oregon Advanced Directive training, and there's a little bit of humor that's involved in that too, and looking at who is your healthcare representative, having conversations with your families about that. If you're 18 or above, you should have Advanced Directive. Because if you will find yourself incapacitated and you're 18 years old, who then makes the decisions for you? You're an adult. So I do what's referred to as PEARLS, which is both a group and workshop helping individuals who, if you're feeling stuck, if you're feeling down, if you're feeling not activated, people join that group and they feel better. So I do suicide prevention training for community members. The highest percentage of population who are experiencing suicidal ideation are particularly men that are older. How do you recognize, how do you respond to that? How do you provide that support? I provide that training. You were going to ask about cafes.
Yes. Age, death, memory cafes.
Okay. So let's start off an example, for instance, an age cafe. You're sitting around the table with other folks, and we throw out the question, if you were a tree, what part of the year would you enjoy the most? Winter into spring, spring into summer, summer into fall, fall into winter. That conversation goes on around there. Then we get into about what it's like as an aging tree. What are the issues, things like that. Then we can do a death cafe and use that same image and ask then, so when you die, are you going to be embalmed? Are you going to be composted? Are you going to be cremated? Have you had that conversation? Have you had it with your family? Part of what having those cafes is having people around the table and they talk to each other about what their experience is. Another thing about death could be, what was your first experience of death, Craig?
It would be my young aunt who died of a brain tumor when I was maybe 6 years old.
And have you talking about that? And I could talk about how my grandmother passed away and what that experience was like. What it ends up doing, it takes away the stigma of having the conversation. First off, we learn there's both positive and not so positive experiences relating to that, but be able to talk about them. But I have a whole group of cards of different things of approaching on that. Then there's the memory cafe, and those are for individuals that are experiencing cognitive decline. You got loved ones, they're taking care of them, they're living the 36-hour day. They're not able to get out. Where they can bring their loved one, it doesn't seem appropriate. They can't take them into a restaurant anymore. Well, a church could have a memory cafe where they all bring their loved one. They're sitting around the table. We end up showing a picture. So say we take this picture right over here that you have behind you and just say, what is it you see there? And get them talking about the picture. It brings up memories, stories, a positive experience of that. And they're, again, with others, they're going through that too. And it's opportunity that way. So that's, again, just some of the things that can be done. Now, as a church, I've done the Getting to Know Dementia series at the church. They've invited community members. I've done cafes. I've done advanced directive training, all that sort of stuff. But also as a church, for you to be looking at what partners that you could be going with, because your other question you have there?
Well, you've actually moved on to the last question.
Yeah.
You know, basically, which is how can the church support this work in the county?
Yeah. And part of it is with the question before, which was about how does social isolation and
Right.
loneliness impact you? You coming together here helps address that.
Right.
Finding ways to bring people together to socialize is huge, because they've shown that social isolation not just affects memory. We looked at during the pandemic how it accelerated memory loss, or accelerated dementia, because it's not just memory loss, but it affects our health in terms of our heart, it affects diabetes, it affects depression, it affects all these things by social isolation. And so the more things that we can do to bring people together and have conversations with your library, have conversations with your other entities, find ways that you can partner together to do that. I know you've been doing that. That's how I first found out, because I was attending the Care Network meeting and contacted your pastor. But I encourage you to go online and read the document by the Surgeon General called Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation.
That particular one, Beth, our
Yep.
pastor, has quoted to us
Yep.
from that, which is why we started.
Yeah,
the
I think I sent
community
it to her.
dinners.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like,
So
yeah.
I encourage you to read that and start thinking about ways that then you can work together with your community partners to do that continuously. It's a never-ending job to bring people together. It's not what church is about. It's bringing people together, right? That's a big part of it. It's the fellowship that's going on.
Right.
And we know during the pandemic how that impacted it. So, again, in there it talks about community-based organizations in terms of what they can do. There's a whole list of things that they can do there. So, again, working with your senior centers, working with your libraries, working with your primary care provider, and so on. So that's lots of things that can be done, and I'd be happy to partner with you in that as well.
Okay, great. I would ask you to send some of that information to Beth, and particularly like when you have some of the trainings coming up, that we could share some of that information, so we could come to some of your community trainings,
Yeah.
but also the information about some of those cafes. I mean, that's sort of what we're doing with the dinners, isn't it? I mean, but people are sitting around having conversations with one another. This sounds like the cafes that you're talking about has a specific sort of focus.
Yeah.
But we've already got the round tables.
And we could bring in and do one of the cafes there.
Yeah.
When I've gone to Hepner at the meal site, they actually had me present on the Oregon Advanced Directive. They're going to have me come in and do the cafes too. So, you know, when I come up here, I'd be more than happy to go more in one place and provide different things while I'm up here. So oftentimes I feel like I'm a circuit preacher. Back in the day.
Well, we understand that, don't
Yeah, yeah. So,
we? Okay.
but again, happy to work with you all. We're in this together. It's a common mission, if you will. So.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Rod. I appreciate your coming and talking.